to leave you cold as stone by the end of the day, and you'll understand what I mean when I get there, but nonetheless, we still have to get there. I actually want to go back to basically the flavor of yesterday afternoon in our discussions about the advent of solar plex mutation and the coming of these very unusual children who are not easily going to be accepted into the embrace of humans. I mentioned that I doubted very much that these silent, flat babies are going to have much of a chance, other than if there's a strong enough infrastructure that can recognize their presence, whether they're going to have much of a chance in this coming cycle, this actual mutative cycle, to actually gain some kind of a foothold. And there's a more than just my intuition about that, is simply the nature of the way in which the cycles operate. In astrological terms, in terms of Western astrology, as we watch the precession of the equinox as it's moving backwards through the wheel, what we've been able to do is we've been able to map out certain ages. That is, we had the Taurian age, we had the Aryan age, we're in the Piscean age, there's a coming Aquarian age. And all of that is about the movement or the precession of that equinox as it moves backwards through astrological signs. If you go back here into the closing of the previous epoch, to the fifth epoch, and you will see here that the equinox, 33 AD, that the equinox is in the 25th gate. Now by the time, and remember we're going backwards, so we're starting at the 25/6, by the time you move down, as you're moving through that, basically what happens is that you're leaving behind what is an Aryan age, and you're entering into the Piscean age. Now that Piscean age, and you can see, because in our language we can see the gates, so you can see the Piscean gates, part of Pisces is in 25, the 36, the 22, the 63, the 37 where we are now. I'm just going backwards in the wheel through Pisces. And if you follow that movement going backward through the wheel through Pisces, the era that we're entering into, that is this transition in 2027, that's still within the Piscean era. We're not going to get to the Aquarian until we get to 2439 and we get to the equinox proceeding backwards into the 30th gate, the clinging fire. That's why they always talk about the burning ground in all these old spiritual books, about the burning ground coming, because the Aquarian age is a very different age. But let's look for a moment at the nature of what the Piscean age has brought us. Everything about the spirituality of the Piscean age is rooted in belief. It's rooted in belief. The two most powerful belief systems in the world, Christianity and Islam, are products of the Piscean era. That is the willingness and the acceptance of humanity to be guided by forces that they cannot know for certain exist, and by rules that are established in the name of those forces that they can never know for certain are real. This is our age. And because we're moving towards the end of it, it doesn't mean it's next door. From the moment I had my experience, the loneliest place I felt was amongst so-called spiritual people. I've never felt so alone in my process as I did in the early years, being surrounded by people that were interested in this philosophy and that teacher and this master and this thing and blah, 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 all of that stuff. And it was all so deeply, deeply, deeply Piscean. It was why that I spent most of my life as a profound atheist. Beyond atheism. I thought the whole thing was rather stupid. And I could not, for the life of me, understand how anybody can believe in something so profound as a concept like that. And all of it takes in terms of the way in which you work your way through your life and the rules that come with it and all the morality and the baggage and everything, and you don't even know for sure. And if you grow up at the end of the 20th century with the advent of world technology and you suddenly see not simply the the horror of our history, but the horror of the life. What this world looked like. How human beings live, how they treat each other, all of these things, and the hatred that exists between this thing and that thing because this one thinks that what they believe in is better than what this one thinks. Madness. This is our age. And it's not going away overnight. When I refer to myself, I always talk about the fact that I'm the first Aquarian teacher. I don't belong here. I don't belong here because I don't believe anything. Anything. I'm a 5-1. I don't trust anything. Anything. This is the reality for me. The reality is, how can I trust you or you or you? Why should I believe in you? Based on what? That you're in charge? That what you say to me is going to be true or real, or you're going to live it or have it or do it or be it? It's all a joke. It's all a joke. I look out at the not-self world. The joke is incredible. You think you're going to strip away their beliefs in a moment? You think all of that's going to dissolve? It isn't. You can see that in our time. The reaction to us moving closer and closer and closer to this age of show me is you get more and more radicalism. The extremes begin to show how much pressure they're under. I talk a lot about the fact that it's so impressive what in our cycle we've been able to accomplish in terms of all of this information and all of the value of all of this and all of the knowledge that's present, all of the facts that you can get access to, all the basic truths that you can see in terms of the context of the Maya. Yet how many people really take advantage of it? It's simply there. There are those of us that are advantaged in that. I still have people who say to me, I don't know if I believe this in reference to human design. And I look at them like, what planet are you from? This has nothing to do with belief. It doesn't. It doesn't. This is the whole point about this knowledge, is that it has nothing to do with believing. It has everything to do with simply experimenting with something that's just logical, something that works. That's why it's not spiritual. You see, I don't think that waking up is spiritual. I don't get that. We're not supposed to be stupid, conditioned, ignorant creatures. Being yourself and being awake, that's not a special state. It isn't. It's normal. It's normal. What's abnormal is the world we live in. What's abnormal is the not-self. That's not real. That's really sick. There's something wrong with that. And yet at the same time, if you open up any publication, you turn on any media, what you get is the selling of the belief systems. To look at the world and to see that you can have entire societies of people that suffer from kleptocrats who are, robbing them blind and living high on the hog while they starve, and nobody does anything. Human beings are sheep. You got somebody sitting in a seat somewhere and says they're bad, and bang, they're gone. This is the reality. And the reality is that all of this is based on something very, very, very simple. It's the abdication of authority. The whole Piscean age is based on the abdication of authority. When Jesus was in the house of the Pharisees, he said, only my Father knows what's clean. Really? Doesn't speak for me, doesn't know what's clean for me, might know what's clean for it. It's all based on the abdication of authority. Allah Akbar. Only God is great. Only God rules. And if I happen to be a priest, if I happen to be imam, in the name of that authority, I tell you how to practice your life. So we have a whole age that's nothing but giving up authority to someone else, something else. That's why we live in an age of blame. I mean, if somebody else is always the authority, somebody else is always to blame. And it goes on in a vicious circle. It is in the Aquarian age that we are meant to come to our own authority, but it's hundreds of years away. Transformation of a society, transformation of a civilization does not happen overnight. It can't. These are movements and waves, generation after generation. Every child being born, including the raves that are going to come into the world, will come in under the influence of the Piscean age. Now it's dissolving. You can see the beginnings of it dissolving, but it's still incredibly powerful. And yet the only liberation that's possible for a human being is that when they claim their own authority. It's this joke for me, if you lay out enough information and if there's enough warning signs so that, when these children come in the coming cycle, that, there is going to be an authority available in order to guide those who need an authority. Still Piscean age. It's why I'm retiring. I'm sick of being a wolf dressed in fishy clothing. I really am. I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of belief systems. I'm tired of people who don't get it. I'm tired of all of that. I'm not a missionary. And I know that this is just seed planting time. And I know that those that will follow me, that those that take the mantle and the responsibility of this, they're still ready to be authorities for others. And it's the way it's going to be for a long time. We're still living in this age. The advantage is that rather than negative conditioning, perhaps we can provide some authoritative, positive conditioning. But it's still the Piscean age. Humanity is still demanding to be guided and led by those who know better. Remember, the age we live in, based on the fear of the 32, has forced us to produce more and more and more, because genetically we're looking for those alphas that are going to guide us to understanding and awareness and knowledge and good life and blah, 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 blah. And hopefully out of that huge crop, we're going to get the material that we need to do all that. But all of that is about the genetic pool looking and creating its own alpha needs, because it's the Piscean era. It's not all these unique, differentiated beings coming in on their crosses and emerging truly as themselves. That's the dream. That's how the journey moves along. That's why it's difficult now. You're out of step. All of you, you're out of step. Any human being that comes to a point of recognizing that there is only their own authority that matters is out of step with the rest of the world. It may sound like a mild out of stepness. It is not. It's deeply offensive to the whole. How dare you think that you can be your own authority? After all, society doesn't like that. It doesn't. Doesn't want it. Doesn't try to nurture that. Doesn't. Pay attention to the rules. Do what you're told to do. If you don't do what you're told to do, you're going to be punished. You accept our authority no matter what. If you don't accept our spiritual authority, you'll be damned. You go to hell. You know, if you don't accept our mundane authority, we can do everything up to taking your life. Our civilization is a Piscean civilization. Where authority is immediately at the top, so you can have an absolute idiot like Bush. And I don't mean anything about policy, just the man's brain. It's mush. And you can take an absolute idiot like that, and you can put that idiot at the top of the authority chain, and millions of people can die. And you've got a whole nation that'll go along with it. And most of them are smarter than he is. This is the Piscean age. You give someone the mantle of authority and everybody nods their head. It's incredible. You see it everywhere. I remember my first experience of being in Munich. I'm a Montrealer. When you grow up in Montreal, lights don't matter if you want to cross a street. You cross in the middle of the street. You can walk down the middle of the street. You can dance between the cars. I guess it's the French influence, who knows? But anyway. And here I am in Munich, in some little suburb of Munich. And there's a light on a street where, you get 3 cars a day. And the light's red. And there isn't a car anywhere. I cross the damn street. And the moment I'm halfway across the street, there's actually a woman yelling at me. Then I shouldn't be doing that. I stopped in the middle of the street. She began to panic. It's insane. And what am I going to say to her? I live by my own authority. I'm an ego manifester. I cross the goddamn street when I want. She isn't going to appreciate that. She isn't going to like that at all. It's not the way things are done in the Piscean era. In the Piscean era, everybody plays good sheep. For me as somebody who is an individual, who is integration, who's a manifester, it's quite natural for me to have tendencies of not particularly appreciating authority. However, I'm an authority myself. I thrive off of my 10 first lines. I understand the importance of being authoritative in those things that you understand and do. But that's very, very different than demanding of others that they do precisely what you tell them to do, because that's the answer. And years ago, in the middle of the 90s, I was in California, and there had been an ad taken out for my arrival, and it was in one of these California freebie esoteric publications. They're about this thick. They look like a telephone book. And inside of it is 8 million pictures of people who are mostly smiling. And truly they offer everything. There isn't anything under the sun that you truly cannot find there. Satan himself has several offices and anything, whatever you want to find, hundreds, thousands, whatever. And I was trying to deal with my flight over, and I couldn't go to sleep yet because it would have messed up my jet lag business. And so I started to sit down and go through this thing. And I had such a good time. It was so funny and expensive, all of them. And my reaction to all of that was, how awful it is to try to plant a logical seed amongst all that madness. in the early years, I only met people who thrived on those kind of publications, who lived off every kind of weird doodah that was available. And I'd look at them and I'd see that, there's no choice after all. This is what Piscean diversity leads to. We're in a diversification program, and you end up with people who have millions of different beliefs. Millions of different beliefs. There are people who believe all kinds of stuff. It's incredible what they believe. All kinds of stuff. From the most banal, to the most esoteric, all this stuff that they believe in. There's an evangelical movement in the United States called the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're very funny people. They keep on claiming the world's going to come to an end. And they've gotten it wrong twice now, so this is a problem. It doesn't affect their fervor. It doesn't stop them from, believing. When Iran and Iraq had their war for almost a decade, there were 10,000 young people between the age of 13 and 16, males, who walked across open desert spaces and acted as living minesweepers. In other words, they were designed to walk across these places and explode the mines so that the tanks, which were limited, wouldn't get destroyed. They all had a key put around their neck, and it was a key to paradise. All of them were guaranteed that, that was going to be their reward. I don't know how people believe such shit, I don't. Not only that, not only did they have a key to paradise, but when they were going to get to paradise, they were going to get 20 virgins. And I keep on wondering where paradise gets all these virgins. Where does paradise get all these virgins? I don't know. I don't get all that stuff. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand how anybody can believe that. I don't mean to belittle anybody's faith. I truly don't. It has nothing to do with that. I accept what is. There is no choice. This is what it is. This is the Piscean age. But me, I look at that and I think, how can you believe that? How can you, on what basis do you accept that as being viable? How? We have trouble with the fact that Jupiter turned into a swan and fucked Leda. We have no problem with Mary having a virgin child. We got a problem here. Who's going to believe that shit? You going to believe that? How do you do that? You say, no, Jupiter can't become a swan. No. It's pre-Piscean. It's the Aryan age. No. Virgin babies, yes. Again, it's not about belittling anybody's faith. It's just you look at that and you think, this is what people believe this stuff. Political rallies. All over the world, you see political rallies. I'm always astonished by the naivety of this. You got 100,000 people in the street. There's a guy up in the balcony who's going to make a fortune. And the guy up in the balcony is never, ever going to fulfill what you believe they should do for you. We know that. We all know that. And there are 100,000 people in the street going,
It's the Piscean age. I mean, I'm really glad it's going to come to an end. I mean, after all, when you think about it, I mean, us, yeah, it sort of makes you uncomfortable if I say things like that. I'm a heretic, I'm allowed to. But it's the truth that when you think of it within the context of the way in which our awareness is defined by our time, if you look at that, you think, well, it's a nice story. It all becomes a story. It's just mythologies. Human beings, they kill each other over this stuff. I mean, they kill each other over these belief systems. They've been killing each other over these belief systems forever. I mean, now, woof, hot time. See, the belief systems are up against the wall because there's creatures like me that, make fun of them. There's a whole subculture on this planet that's abandoning traditional spirituality in droves. And, you have the reaction on the other side, and I look at it, and I don't get it. I mean, I don't get it. How dense. So when these children are going to come into the world, what happens to them isn't about the potential grace in each human being. It's about what the sheep will do, according to who tells the sheep what to do. That's just the way it is. This is really an uphill struggle. This is seed time. This is the planting of the seed of unique authority. And that you can see when we look at our cycle that we're coming into, it's so individual. It's there to bring that movement towards your own authority. So you have these deep individual and integration themes that are present in the 2027 cycle in order to slowly develop that process within us that we become less and less and less and less dependent on somebody else's or something else's authority. There is no other authority. There isn't. And you see, the not self, when it takes a concept like that, it says, but that leads to anarchy, because that's the not self and the way it would perceive that. But it's not true. It's not like we're in charge of anything. To be yourself is not to alter your geometry. And the geometry of correctness is not something that will appear anarchistic or chaotic at all. It might operate differently. If all the generators on this planet were actually responding, this whole planet would function differently. There's no question that it can, operate differently, but the geometry, no. It isn't going to lead to anarchy. It isn't going to lead to chaos. It's going to lead to life being life. We're life. We are the life force. So when I look out and I look in the front window and I look out that window and I look into the future, though I see many things that are coming in this cycle that are very exciting, the advent of the rave, the real beginning of the completion, if you will, of our trinary awareness program, that we finally complete that process. It is the program's demand of us. Yet at the same time, I have no illusions about how well that mutation is going to function in the cycle that we're entering into. There's going to be enormous demands on humanity. Humanity is going to have to deal with infertility, and they're going to have to deal with famine, and they're going to have to deal with disease, and they're going to have to deal with things that are going to damage the basic infrastructure, the human infrastructure. Right now in Africa, going across the southern belt of Africa and in the north, you have two areas of famine that are rising. But particularly when you're looking at the southern belt, and that southern belt, The problem isn't just that they've had a drought for a number of years. Um, Droughts are a part of that world. They have an enormous problem with labor force because of HIV. You got 30 million people in that part of the world that have HIV. And you're slowly losing the infrastructure to be able to actually just bring the crops in or plant them, do any of those things, because you simply don't have enough labor. And it's one of the things to understand about population crash is that on the surface, population crash could be interesting, quote unquote. In other words, obviously there's going to be many more resources available for less numbers so that we may get to a point of balance and stability in terms of what everybody who is alive can have access to. All of that sounds very nice. Yet at the same time, you have to recognize that, most of that destruction is going to take place, most of the human destruction is going to take place in the most impoverished, overpopulated, and at-risk environments. The ability to be able to provide the infrastructure labor necessary to maintain life on the planet is not something that's going to be easily dealt with, particularly in an era where technology is not going to be king, survival will be. We're already dealing with examples of what happens when that falls apart. And of course, the famine in that part of the world can become endemic now, simply because there isn't a labor force that can go back in once the drought has ended and actually, do something about bringing the fields back into life and being able to provide enough sustenance for people. I don't have a lot of confidence in the Piscean Age, as you can tell. I'm not a fan of the Piscean Age. I don't think any of my incarnations in the Piscean Age were worth a damn, except for this one. That's just a joke, but nonetheless. I wasn't born to get that. I wasn't born to understand all of that. I want to take you to the next step in this process. When you look at this cycle, first of all, the thing to recognize is that there's quite a ways to go. And even if you don't look at the rapid speeding up of things, if you just look from the beginning of the modern era, 0, AD, and you go to the 1,000-year point, you'll see that in those 1,000 years, an enormous amount of change took place. If you go from 1,000 to 2,000, obviously, because we have this speeding up, you see vast, vast changes that are going to take place. Obviously, from the time that we enter into this stage until we get to the end of the process, you've got a lot of time. There's a lot of stuff that's going to go on in our context. I do want you to understand that in the evolutionary sense, it doesn't mean very much. It's a very, very, very little amount of time for the development, for example, of the Homo sapien rave. I mean, if you look at the development of our species, hominids began somewhere around 4 to 6 million years ago. We didn't have anything remotely similar to us until about maybe 400,000 years ago. We didn't really have our model until about 100,000 years ago. So all of these things take time. And so the idea that we're going to have this mutation that's going to emerge in the world, to be very realistic about the way that works, it's not something that's simply going to flood the market. It isn't. It isn't. It's going to struggle, as all new mutation does. It's going to struggle to find its footing in the world. My feeling, as I've mentioned, is that it isn't really going to have a chance until you finally get to the beginning of the Aquarian age itself, and that's going to begin, it's after this date, by the way, I'll show you why, but it's just after this date. It's about 15 years or 20 years later. That what we're looking at here is that this is the tempering ground. In other words, a new process of initiation. And a new process of initiation into the individual integration process of being busy about your own survival, busy about your own survival, busy about your own survival. I mean, we're going to have hundreds of years of busy about your own survival. It's what I call the new dark age. Because it's basically what it is for me. It's a new dark age. It's a new dark age in the sense that, the age of light is where we are right now. Because what we're doing is literally shedding light on everything. We're opening up the darkness to see the secrets, to be able to, take in all the information we need. But once that platform is established and we move from first line to sixth line, that we move from having a solid foundation to actually just living out that foundation as an example of, as we've talked about, differentiation. All of that is being conditioned in this round. The fact that it's being conditioned so powerfully is only because it is the build-up to the Aquarian age. In other words, it is the natural entrance into a time in which there is only unique authority. Now remember, everything about life is binary. And the not-self will survive to the last day. I mean, it's not like we're going to eliminate the not-self. We're not. It will survive to the end. All things, it'll get to the end. It's a very powerful force. You're not just going to get rid of it like that. You're not going to wake up everybody. This is not the movie. It's not. See, the Piscean teacher, the Piscean whatever, it gives you a promise. It gives you a promise you can believe in. And the promise that you can believe in is that what you're doing is going to lead to its completion and fulfillment. This isn't. It isn't the way it works. It isn't. The most important thing that we have as our process is simply the journey. Remember, this is a mutative process. At any moment, at any time, it can all be changed. Ask the dinosaurs. Any moment, any time, journey's over. Sorry. Yeah, but I was trying to get to the next valley. Tough. This isn't about getting to a point where everybody wakes up. When I first started, I was surrounded by all of these Piscean spiritual people. Oh, God. And they'd say to me, this is the answer. Yeah, relax. No. Everybody's got to know. Relax. It's not the point. It's not the point. If you have a belief system, you can sell it to the world in 8 minutes. If you want to teach them the truth, it takes time. And you never get them all. Never. Never. It's not the point. It's not the point. What's going to happen to the whole is that as we move into this next cycle in 2027, the pressure is going to change. The community's gone. It doesn't mean it's going to disappear overnight, but what it does mean is that a communal bond isn't going to be the thing anymore. No 3740 as an overriding theme saying, okay, children, let's be together. Let's be organized as sheep and let's pick ourselves an alpha to guide us. That's not going to be the point. The point is going to be, yes, I'd love to join, but I'm busy. Not, I don't want to join because my authority, me, says no. It'll be, I'm not going to join because I'm busy. Because that's the conditioning. The conditioning is, be busy with yourself. Be busy with yourself. Be busy with yourself. Be busy with yourself. Going to have hundreds of years of, be busy with yourself. Be busy with yourself. And slowly the Piscean will just get kicked out of it. I don't know when this was now. Not too long ago, anyway. There was this comet, Schumacher-Levy. And this comet, Schumacher-Levy, was going to bang into Jupiter. It was a big event. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whenever that was. And I was at that time still living on the island of Ibiza, and Ibiza is full of it's a kind of microcosm of the spiritual zoo in the world. And there was a branch of that spiritual zoo that the moment that they found out that a comet was going to hit Jupiter, they were putting aluminum foil on their windows. They were getting ready for some cosmic event that was going to literally destroy the Earth. And they believed that shit. And anyway, it was a wonderful thing because we had, I watched it on, you could see it on television, it was really quite an interesting global event to watch the phenomena of Schumacher-Levy banging into Jupiter. And it was actually some of the photographs are incredible because the gravitational mass of Jupiter broke the comet up as it was approaching Jupiter. And you had this string of absolutely glowing white beads of light, like a string of jewels moving in the sky and banging into Jupiter. And of course they did, and blah, 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 and that was the end of the event, and nothing happened, and the people could take the aluminum foil off their windows. But what was really amusing for me, what I thought was just wonderful, was I was listening to some scientific commentator on television, and an astrophysicist, and he was talking about the environment, and he was being asked about what the impact was. In other words, what actually had taken place. Did it do any damage to Jupiter, and so forth and so on. And the funniest thing he said, the chemical reaction between the comet and Jupiter's outer atmosphere, that chemical combination, if you could actually get close enough so you could smell it, it would smell like dead fish. And I thought, yeah, right, here comes the end of the Piscean age. Jupiter smells like dead fish. Jupiter, one of the rulers of Pisces, dead fish. And nonetheless, it's not over yet. But you can see the way the program is going to move humanity. Now think about something. The whole nature of the not-self is that the not-self does not love. I mean, that's the most basic thing to understand about the not-self. If you are not really capable of love, then you're always going to be seeking the authority that somebody else can bring to your life. Always. The whole business about what we call love. If you cannot be your own authority, then you are not ready to love anything. 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 Love for the not-self is accepting somebody's authority that they're worthy. It's accepting somebody else's authority that they're worthy. It's why when we break up in relationships, when we have divorces, all of those things, the real pain of that is you've lost your worthiness. You're no longer of value. And how damaging that is to the not-self, that they believe that they accept that as a truth, that they feel that way, that they feel empty within themselves, that they feel that they have lost value, that they're hurt. But that's because they never loved in the first place, and that they were never love in the first place. No matter how powerful the era, no matter how strong the conditioning as it moves everyone towards the Aquarian phenomena, the not-self that is not its own authority, the not-self that does not love itself, this is not going to be an era of unique creative exploration. It's going to be frightening. It's going to be frightening. Because everyone's too busy to pretend to love you. And we're becoming sterile. And we're becoming extinct. And the sex drive is disappearing. And that not self with no love within itself. Remember, we human beings, everything about us is how we deal with our aloneness. And we have to deal with our aloneness first because it's the only truth. It's like my wonderful friend Frank, one of the first people I met in Ibiza, and he introduced himself as God. And I, at some point, questioned him about that. And he said to me, well, it's true, Ra. He said, when I die, I take you with me. I take the whole damn world with me. I take every star in the sky with me. It's all gone. You are my creation. I see you, therefore I create you. You're my creation, I'm God. And when I go, you're fucked. That's it. And I thought, well, it's true. I'll take you all with me too. It's true. I mean, after all, what are you to me? You're on the outside. Only I'm here on the inside. Somebody else wants to get inside. I like good timing, eh? Let me inside. No, I'm on the outside. I don't want to be on the inside. I want to be on the inside. What's going on in there? It's the inside that matters. It's one of the things that bothers me the most about Piscean spirituality is that somehow you're supposed to be spiritual because you hold hands with somebody else and stand in front of a statue. It's in here. It's all in here. It's all in here. You know, if you take two sticks and you jam them up my nose and you push them up into my neocortex right here, you'll lobotomize me. Everything disappears. It's all gone. There's nobody I know. There's nothing I recognize. There's nothing to do. You know, it's just whoosh. If you're not in here and you're not loving this, and you can only love yourself not as a concept. You know, it's not about loving yourself in the sense of, you know, you're suddenly going to look in the mirror and figure out how to love you. It doesn't work that way. There's too many handicaps to that, you know? Too many old memories, too many old pictures, too many old mirrors. That's not the way you find love for yourself. You find love for yourself in being correct. Because that's how you discover your worthiness, your value, your beauty. It's where you find your mythology. You know, the specialness of what you are as a differentiated being. You know, that's the whole point. And at the moment that you begin to do things with your own authority, it's the moment you get to see what being correct brings. And you begin to see that you're exactly the right person in the right place at the right time. And that is wonderful, because that's what it's about. Doesn't mean that because we're entering into a new age and there's going to be this and there's going to be that the not self is simply going to disappear. It isn't. And you can't imagine the horror of what it's like in an era like that. Right now, the not self can still hold itself together with belief. I know there'll be a better day. I hope that there'll be a better day. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pray for a better day. And on and on and on and on and on. You know, there's this good Piscean massage that's all around that keeps the not self going. Yes, but, you know, maybe the next teacher, you know, maybe the next course, maybe the next, whatever the case may be, you know, and maybe I just get lucky and, you know, it shows up at my door. Whatever the case may be, the Piscean flavor provides a rationalization for the not self's pain. It just does. So easy for the not self to blame suffering on the devil, you know, or to blame Well, there's already somebody going to bring out a CD of my heresies. I'm going to be in so much trouble when that one comes out. See, as a mechanic, I look at the mechanics and I see, okay, you're going to have 400 plus years in which you're going to have an enormous pressure on humankind, because I'm not talking about how this impacts on raves. What you're going to have is an enormous pressure on humankind to individuate. But in order for humankind to individuate, certain things have to break down. That is, organizational control has to break down. It must. It has to. Institutional control has to break down. It must. It has to. You know, the era that we're living in, this is the peak of organizational power. You know, you can only build the level of organization and institutionalized frameworks and structures that we have on belief systems. You can't build it on anything else. You know, because wherever you look is all these structures of hierarchies guiding sheep below them. You know, when I talk about the fact that there's no end to hierarchies, I'm not talking about alphas and sheep. I'm just talking about where you are. You know, there's a place for everyone. Knowing your place is something you can only find through your own authority, and then you get to recognize there's no place at all. It's just your life. Everything's okay. I'm not talking about the false hierarchies that we have, whether they are political hierarchies or spiritual hierarchies. In fact, I've taught many of you that the only real hierarchy, the only legitimate hierarchy exists through type. And that's something that will flourish in this coming time. You know, it's one of the main attributes of human design that will take hold in the general population. Many aspects of human design will not. Again, there's a real problem in the Piscean age with being your own authority. But the strategies of type, because they yield easy success, and that the strategies of type, when taught to children, you know, are something that the children benefit from very quickly and adapt to very easily, because in fact it is their nature. You know, that's something that's going to build a strong framework into this next cycle. This next cycle will see the dominance, the rising dominance of projectors. It will see a transformation in the way the energy level of the planet operates. Because the energy level of the planet will operate differently, because generators as a whole will operate differently. I mean, the most deeply impacted population group over the next hundreds of years of design will remain generators. And remember something about being a generator and understanding your strategy. You can still end up being the not self and still benefit. I mean, it's one of the things I understand about the nature of my work. You know, I can do 100 readings for people. And out of those 100 readings, I may find 10 students. And out of those 10 students, I may get one that will ultimately be awake. But I also know that all 100 of them that came to me in the first place all benefited from the knowledge. It took certain burdens away from them in their lives. They will use their strategy on occasion. Doesn't mean they'll use it all the time. It doesn't. People are deeply locked into their lives, and any of you who have heard me speak of the strategies of open centers know clearly how dense the conditioning environment is of the not-self. This is not something easy to penetrate. But the advantage of type, its statistical verification, and its ultimate scientific development, because it scientifically will be developed over the next 25 years, that's something that's going to add a different flavor in the future to this coming era. And again, it's not like it'll be universal. It won't. It won't. You're still in the Piscean age. If you get to the root of what I teach, you know, it's very difficult to be one with that and also be involved in any dogmatic religion. I mean, it just doesn't work. The very fact that human design is predicated on the so-called soul, the personality crystal entering into the body 88 degrees of the sun before birth, goes against every single religion that we have on the planet. You know, it's not like there is a comfortable relationship that exists at a deep level a level below the surface between the basic mechanical understanding of human design and the belief systems that surround the religions that exist in the world today that are rooted in Piscean phenomena. You know, the Aquarian challenge to the Piscean is a very profound challenge. You know, and at some point, obviously in this coming era, you know, those are things that are going to clash. We're seeing the beginning of it. You know, the Osama bin Laden movie. We're seeing the beginning of it. You know, they're already calling it a clash of civilizations. We are seeing the beginning of it. We're seeing the beginning of the end game. And that is the end game between the authority of some supra whatever and the unique individual authority. And it's not the struggle that it appears right now, because the guise that it appears in now is just the political costume of the moment. But the underlying theme is authority something that rightfully must come from the top somewhere and be disseminated outwards in order to maintain balance, control, health, well-being, blah, 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 blah. Or does each and every single human being have the right to be their own authority? That's the battle line. And I say battle line because it's not going to be nice. It's not. It's not. It never is with humans. If you think you've got a trouble between Catholics and Protestants, I mean, you wait and see what you've got between all of the religions and the basic premise of human design. And of course, human design being scientific, you know, we end up with one of these, you know, these final clashes. After all, the only thing that stands in the way of humanity actually operating together in harmony, aside from the obvious, which is, you know, food and shelter and so forth and so on, is the fact that we are deeply, deeply divided in what we believe. We're not terribly divided in what we understand at all. But we're very divided in what we believe. And this is the last challenge. I mean, after all, this is the whole point. You know, the whole point is to get there. And by the way, we have multiple binaries that are at work.